Also, Driver Bob he must have just gotten late or something, because Driver Bob seems he's very cheery this week.
Hi, folks. This is Louis Herfin, the original Peter Abernathy. Hell is empty and all the devils are here on the Shat on TV Westworld podcast with Roger, Gene, and Big D.
Welcome back to Shat on TV Westworld Edition, the unofficial podcast companion piece for the hit HBO television series Westworld. I'm one of your hosts, Roger Roper, and alongside me is my co-host, Gene Charloris Lyons.
Freeze all motor functions. Let's try again. Trial 11,927.
And this is our fan email episode where we look back on Westworld Season 2 and provide our feedback on the top listener emails for the week and a little segment we call the Westworld Telegraph. You spent an hour listening to our ideas on Wednesday's Season 2 Deep Dive. Now it's our turn to hear from you. Gene, Big D could not be with us. He is in South Carolina at a lake house where there's very little rural internet speed, which is a major problem here in America, which is why you really need to write into your congressperson and let them know that they really need to expand broadband service everywhere, not just major cities.
Oh, we've got Daddy Roger Roper here tonight. It's going to be a good one. Uplifting, lighthearted.
But Big D, I hope you're having a good time up in South Carolina. Before we get started there, we've got this thing called the Westies going on. What are the Westies?
Yeah, as a final farewell to Season 2, we'd like to cap it off with some awards. We had some really great success doing this with Game of Thrones, with the Thronies, so we decided to do the Westie Awards. Right now, through the end of the weekend, you can go to shatontv.com/Westies. Westie Award voting is in full swing, so there's more than 150 votes and nominations. We've got set categories. You can go vote for your favorite scenes, your favorite characters, your favorite moments in Westworld. And then, and if you don't like something you see, add a nomination. Anyway, we will read those all in next week on a special Westie's drinking episode where we're going to be playing a drinking game at the same time. So be sure to go in and vote, please, please, please. And let everyone know what you think was the best of Season 2.
Yeah, if you've never listened to Shat on TV Westworld, we do 3 episodes a week. But now that it's the off season, we're like doing 2. We're doing a deep dive and we do a telegraph. But then after this, Gene, are we planning to do a monthly telegraph if interest is still there?
I mean, I think the numbers right now are pretty strong. So I was looking at the downloads from the 4th of July Season 2 recap. They're actually pretty strong considering it's a holiday and the show is over for the season. If the numbers stay strong, people keep downloading, people keep subscribing. I'm happy to keep doing it, maybe monthly, just keeping people up to date and keeping the conversation going, maybe in a telegraph format where people can write in and we can respond to them. And they might be shorter ones, just to keep the thing alive, 10, 20 minutes. I think it'd be a lot of fun.
Yeah, well, you can check out all the great emails that we receive across all of our seasons on our website, shatontv.com. There you can read and respond to them, join the conversation on our website. You can also check us out over at our sister podcast, Shat the Movies, where we review 80s and 90s movies that you, the audience, votes on. I'm over there, Big D, Gene, Carrie, a couple of our special guests, including, is it Cole Pickle?
Cole Pickok.
Cole Pickok and the King Bee. We're all over there at Shat the Movies. If you like us going off on crazy rants and you want to just hear us cut loose, that's where you can find all the information over at shatthemovies.com. We also do Taboo. We also do American Gods. We also do Game of Thrones. So we don't know when those are coming back, but if and when they do, we will be here chatting alongside you. That being said, Gene, what do we have in store for tonight's Telegraph?
Tonight's Telegraph is another batch of really strong ones. We have some that were leftovers from last week that were so good, but we just did not have the time to get to all of them, but we really wanted to do them the justice of having them on the podcast. And we've got some new ones that have come in since our last deep dive. So quite a few there and a few voicemails as well. So lots of strong stuff. A lot of kind of retrospective season recap sort of things and questions that we don't necessarily have the answers to. They're kind of open-ended questions, so might be a little bit of spitballing on this episode, which can always be fun.
Yeah, we also have a couple of voicemails. If you haven't ever written into us, you can email us, hosts at shatontv.com, or call our hotline at 914-719-SHAT. That being said, Gene, do me the favor and turn on that telegraph. All right, our first Westworld Telegraph comes in from Steve M. Steve M writes in, Hey, from my other email account, very host-like, I have a question about Bernard's plan in the season finale. Just before Hale Dolores changes the coordinates to beam the host's minds into their VR safe room, she says, "This is your plan, Bernard." Then, in Dolores' interview with Bernard, when he asks, "Is this now?" she says, "We're exactly where you decided we should be." What plan and what decision is Dolores talking about? When was the plan and the decision made? Any Shat-ering insight? I'm glad you guys are still discussing the show. Your comments and so many listeners' comments make the show even more interesting. And this comes from Steve M.
So, Steve, I'd heard a lot of people say they thought that the host data from the hosts that went into Eden or the Valley Beyond went into a server at Bernard's house or Arnold's house on the mainland. And I thought, that's pretty presumptive. It makes more sense to me if they just went out somewhere where they couldn't be reached at all, someplace safe, like, outer space or something like that. But this does seem to indicate it would nudge me in the direction of thinking that maybe Bernard did have a place, or Arnold had a place for this host data to go, in which case this would make a lot of sense, that being part of the plan, that we're going to move these hosts to another spot. And then again, the beginning, could mean the beginning of the next movement for the hosts. What kind of would cheapen that whole thing, though, is that I felt that The Passenger as an episode gave us a divergence of host destinies. So you had the ones who were in the Pearls that were going to the mainland. You had the other ones that got beamed out. If they all ended up at the same place, to me, that feels, I don't know, it's a little confusing, and it kind of is very circuitous. I don't know that I like that storyline, but it might be the case.
Obviously, we've seen the letterbox that tells the audience that we're in the Forge or we're in the Cradle. Is there a version of the Cradle, that VR space, if you will, in the Bernard Arnold safe house on the mainland?
I'm not sure. I mean, it seemed like with both the Cradle and with the Forge, they needed quite a bit of space for what they were hosting, I guess, there. No pun intended. So I don't know if they could fit it there. Although, if you look at the architecture of Arnold/Bernard's house on the mainland, it seems very specific and almost like a bridge between. We saw the same structure in the Cradle, so who knows? This could get very Ghostbustery very quickly.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Steve M, for writing in. We appreciate it. Our next Westworld Telegraph comes from Michael in Denmark. He writes in, "Hey guys, I was watching the James Delos fidelity test scenes and then compared them with the post-credit scene with William. Did you notice that the sand in the time glass turned from white to black, and the decoration on the shelves are not identical? So the rooms for their fidelity tests are not the same. Or do I need a reboot? Keep up the good work." And this is Michael from Denmark. And he sent in some photos that we'll post online.
Yeah, so looking at the photos, Michael's got a photo of James Delos where he's doing his great dance to Roxy music in the fishbowl. And you can very clearly see that there's a white hourglass on a table next to the sofa. And then if you look in the scenes with Emily in them, there are black decorations on the shelves, and there is a black hourglass, an hourglass with black sand in it. And it's a very differently shaped hourglass, too. Hourglasses seem to even reflect sort of the like a bespoke persona. If you look at the white one for James Delos, it's very sort of mid-century modern, a little on the kind of a bulbous side. And if you look at the Man in Blacks, it looks more old-timey. It's got a more metal frame to it. So there's seems to be some significance there. That's a great catch. I did not see it upon first, second, or third viewing. So nice catch.
Great catch, Michael. Again, we'll post these photos. I don't know what it means, but there has to be some sort of semblance. And so go look at these photos. Tell us what you think. If you have some insight into why they'd be different. Obviously, black, Men in Black. But I mean, that seems too easy. There's got to be something deeper there, as there typically is in Westworld. So, Michael, thank you so much for writing in. And we apologize for Denmark being ousted from the World Cup. You guys gave it a good run.
But you got to love the Scandinavian design of the fishbowl.
Oh,
good
absolutely.
Catch.
Our next Westworld Telegraph comes in from Randy Lee. It's entitled In Defense of Humanity. He says, "I believe that one of the reasons that this season of Westworld has a mixed reaction is that over and over again, the point made that humanity, and by extension the audience, doesn't deserve to go on. This deconstruction of humanity basically falls into three categories. Humans suck, humans are simple, and humans are just passengers in biological survival machines. As Jules says in Pulp Fiction, well, allow me to retort. The first one, humans suck. I think Big D did a great job in the Telegraph of breaking down how skewed Dolores' worldview must be. Even with 4 million guests code to look over, that still, by 2050, will only account for half of 1% of the population. On top of this, and it is a very select population, imagine if Dolores had instead been a host at Six Flags for over 30 years, she might conclude that all of humanity liked roller coasters, overpriced food, and comically large stuffed animals. Number 2, humans are simple. I can understand why human behavior might have less complexity than a host's. A lot of our behavior is learned. As a child, we study and mirror the behavior that we see around us. We learn in a series of plateaus, while hosts have to have all behaviors programmed from the start. I would, however, point out that a mere 10,000 lines of code allowed a small band of nomadic people to spread over virtually every surface of this earth. That code created art, philosophy, mathematics, and science. With the code that we created the works of Shakespeare and landed on the moon. Oh, and let's not forget that the code created the Forge and all the hosts. Let us not be too quick to dismiss what we have done with just 10,000 lines. And lastly, humans are just passengers. The view presented by Dolores and the Forge is that we are just passengers, while all of our real decisions are made to ensure survival. People do not rush into burning buildings or collapsing towers because of survival. These are conscious choices to save people we don't even know. Look at the Shout on TV podcast and the website. I don't know you guys personally, but I doubt that if you started this because you had dreams of immense wealth. If you did, there must certainly be easier ways to make a buck. Instead, it seems like a labor of love, just as each listener, poster, and caller have all made very deliberate choices to be involved. Again, this comes from Randy Lee.
So, Randy, I like that you did a good job here of defending humanity, which was the point of your Telegraph. The show has so far painted a fairly bleak picture of humanity over 2 seasons. It was so thorough, in fact, that we in our last podcast talked about the fact that we were rooting against humanity, that we thought AI deserved a shot to take over the world and to win that war. You make a very strong argument, though, about that simple code being able to create things that are not entirely necessary for survival. And there's a concept referred to as sort of like a survival utility, let's say, where everything that we do can be linked to some sort of survival, even though it's not on its face apparent. So it's basically like when a dog circles before lying down. It's not necessary anymore, but there was a time when there was a reason for that, right? They're checking the surroundings. They're softening up the area that they're going to lie down on. I think humans in a lot of the ways are the same way, although it may not seem that we do the podcast for any reason other than to share with the community. I think deep down, there are drivers that make someone like me or someone like Raj want to do this, want to pour the hours into it. And I bet you if you dug down deep enough, there's some sort of survival instinct or some part of our code that makes this appealing to us. That being said, it is a wide world out there, and there are lots of people from very vastly different walks of life with very different interests and different cultures. It's very narrow-minded to kind of pigeonhole everybody into one bucket on this show.
Yeah, I did this just so I could play air horns and sound effects on the podcast. Also, I'm still waiting for that Tommy John underwear sponsorship so I can get some cool air boxer briefs.
Air horn boxer briefs.
Bazinga.
Thank you so much for writing in. Our next Westworld Telegraph comes in from David Pascal. David writes in, I love the season 2 finale. Loved it. Has to be one of the best hour and a half of television I've ever watched. The twist with Bernard bringing back Dolores, Charlotte, and then needing to scramble his memories so Delos wouldn't find out definitely paid off for me. How dare I doubt you, Westworld, with all your timeline confusions. For one brief moment, season 2 made total sense to me last night. It was when Bernard was giving his monologue on the beach and realized that he imagined Dr. Ford in his mind and in his own voice he was hearing. It was a very brief, fleeting moment of total comprehension. And if I think about it too hard and try to explain it, that comprehension will disappear. I think sometimes viewers and critics just start overthinking the show and it just ruins it for them. Just sit back and enjoy it. You don't need to understand every little detail. You only need to see the big picture movements and swings. If you need to understand why every little detail, you will just drive yourself insane. You don't need to understand how instruments work to enjoy your favorite song playing on the radio. You just need to enjoy the song. I like cinema in which not every little detail needs to be spelled out and explained to you. For me, leaving some vagueness feels more like art and a truthful representation of real life. I was completely satisfied with the explanations received in the finale. And of course, this one comes from David Pascal.
David, I agree with you for the most part. I think that metaphor that you used about music was really effective in getting my mind going on this topic. However, using that metaphor of music, I would liken Westworld to maybe one of those songs with a little too much air horn in it, right? Where you kind of find that you've got some hook or some sort of song feature. Right now, Raj, I'm sure you know the songs I'm talking about. The ones where it's like they'll always be pop songs with some weird sound in it. And then they always have like it's like a beer or something like that. Like they'll put some weird sound in there and people go crazy for that shit for some reason.
Yeah.
And then it gets pushed to the limit. And I think that's the thing with this is it's a beautiful song. And I don't need to know how all the instruments are played, but you don't need to keep using the same gag in the song to keep me interested in the song. The song itself should be able to do all right. And in addition, when you chop a song up that much and remix it over and over again, it sometimes loses the appeal of the, of what the artist originally did. Again, another musical metaphor, talk about sophomore albums. Almost every band has had a shitty sophomore album. And it's because of, I think, what happened on Westworld. You had a great opening album. You tried to come up with something different for album 2, and you lost some of the essence of what made you great in the first place.
Definitely agree with the analogy of you don't have to know how the music is played in order to understand it. But I mean, have you ever listened to like a really shitty song? Remember what was Britney Spears' boyfriend, Kevin Federline? Remember when he tried to be a rapper? They released that single and it was like Brazilian drums and it was all like really terrible. And of course it was Kevin Federline. You know, a terrible song without even having to know what terrible instruments they put into it. I think that, yes, people probably overthink Westworld way too much, but also you have to understand that not everyone, I mean, we live in a world where reality television series like Big Brother and The Bachelorette are number 1 and number 2. And what's the Bazinga show? Big Bang Theory. People like fast food entertainment. So I think part of the fun of Westworld, part of the reason we do what we do here is because it's a thoughtful show. It requires multiple watchings. It requires you to go out and seek deeper meanings. And I think that's enjoyable. And so if I like a song enough, I'll go out and I'll learn about the artist. I'll learn about how they made that music. I want to know more. If I don't like music, like Kevin fucking Federline's music, I'm not going to do that. And so I think that's the analogy that a lot of people have when watching a show like Westworld.
I do want to applaud David, however, on having the guts to stand up and say, you know what, I really like this season, because there's nothing wrong with that. Like, people who love this season, great. There were other people who season 1 didn't really appeal to them that much. And for me, I thought season 1 was nearly perfection. So again, it's, be your own person. Kudos to you for saying, hey, look, I really liked it. Here's the reasons why. And I think there are millions of people clearly who are in the same camp as you, David. So you're not alone, man.
Thanks for writing in. Our next Westworld Telegraph comes in from Jeremy. Jeremy writes in, I listened to your thoughts on the Maeve's death scene. When watching it, I thought the way that you guys did, but you guys completely misunderstood the scene with Maeve holding off the horde and dying. I watched it with my wife. She wept that entire scene. But she wasn't weeping for Maeve dying. She was weeping on the goodbye to her daughter. What you guys did not seem to notice, and myself included, is that Maeve really didn't care about dying either. She was sad about the fact that she was saying a final goodbye to her daughter, whom she will never see again. It was her cornerstone. Quite possibly the most important thing to her entire life. I agree with the way the music was played. The scene was leading. It seems like they were setting up a big death to me, but as well as you men, we are heartless, unfeeling pieces of shit. And of course, this comes from Jeremy P.
I agree, Jeremy, that scene was more about Maeve's daughter than Maeve. And I think I said during the deep dive or the Instacast on that, that look that Aki gave Maeve as he was shepherding her daughter and new Maeve into the Valley Beyond into Eden, that spoke volumes, and it was a very touching moment. I think that the execution of Maeve's death specifically is what didn't work for us. So on one hand, the emotional impact of the scene overall was effective, but the just Maeve's death scene just seemed kind of cobbled together in a strange way. And I think you could chalk a lot of it up into editing, right? That scene shot from a different angle at a different speed, with a different perspective, and maybe even different music, could have had a very drastically different impact. And that, I think that comes down to directing. It comes down to production. It's no shortcoming on the part of Tandy Newton, who's done a fantastic job this season.
We were all rooting for Maeve. We understood the concept of the scene. It just didn't hit. It didn't land. I think we chalked it up to, well, it's because everyone can come back and maybe that's why. But honestly, I think like you, Gene, it had to do with the directing. It was just weird. There's like a weird hard cut to Sylvester and Felix running up a cliff and a mountain and overlooking. How did they get there? Like when did they get off their horse? They were just on a horse like a minute ago.
Even the deployment of Clementine's virus seemed it was just kind of sloppy and clunky, and it just didn't work. It felt very lazy as it kind of rolled up the hill. And you can do that effectively, i.e. the Terminator, where something is coming and you cannot stop it, and it's horrifying because it's a juggernaut and it keeps coming. But do you think, Raj, in a way too, that we felt like we've seen this before with the Matrix and with Star Wars, the whole handout, like stopping things? I felt like maybe the way they depicted it felt kind of cliched.
I agree with you on that. I mean, think about it. When you want to use the Force, like as a little kid, or I don't know, as a mid-30s man, have you ever like gone to a supermarket that has the automatic doors and you just wave your hand in front of it and then they opens?
I mean, I still do that every time I get drunk. Yeah.
Yeah. It's fun, right? It's a fun thing to do. That's a learned habit. I think we've learned that gesture now is just part of our, it's part of the zeitgeist. So they obviously have to do it, but you're right. It's why one hand? Put two hands up, or do what the Chris Pratt did with when he's holding the three velociraptors like that. Like you believe that gesture, even though it's the same thing. Whoa, hold. You know me, Blue. You know me. Whoa, hold. And then he goes and runs and dives under the cage. So yeah, I think we've seen it a lot, and something else needed to be done. She's wearing the cape and everything like that, and I don't know. It's a whole thing.
Yeah, I almost would have liked to see it more like a Game of Thrones, where she actually moves into the crowd. Yeah, like she moves her body into the fray, and that's what causes it to hold. And at that point she's sacrificing herself. That's powerful.
You know what else would have been awesome? Like just as she's walking towards it, similar to like what Daenerys does, is like she does the open palms underneath. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like
Misa.
No, not that. She's just walking towards it, and maybe slowly like lifts her arms up as she gets closer, and as it's getting, as it's getting harder for her to hold it. I don't know. Get me in the writer's room is what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Get me some pizza.
All right. Thank you so much for writing in. Our next Westworld Telegraph comes in from the amazing Gerbear. Gerbear?
I think it's Gerbear.
Gerbear. All right. In regards to
somebody never followed the Grateful Dead.
Oh, is that what it's from?
You strike me as a Grateful Dead guy.
I'm not a deadhead.
But you're a Dave Matthews guy.
I like Dave Matthews, and I like Widespread Panic, but I not a big like, I respect Deadheads. I respect their stuff. I mean, I enjoyed Cherry Garcia, the ice cream cone flavor from Ben and Jerry's, but I think the only song I really liked of the Grateful Dead was A Touch of Grey, which I understand if you're a Deadhead, like they never played A Touch of Grey because it was too mainstream.
I just imagine the Venn diagram between Dave Matthews fans and Deadheads is like some sort of an engorged anus. Like it's that much of an overlap.
All right. Back to the amazing Jerbears Telegraph. They write in regards to viewers disliking Tessa as Hale. In casting Tessa and Hale, to me, was about picking someone who could draw the ire of everyone that works in the park. No one is supposed to like her. She's supposed to be a ball-breaking badass, which is why her vulnerabilities are more interesting and better acted in contrast. If you didn't like her, then she did her job. Not liking her in Thor is a mystery. Is it acting, direction, script? But I understand. And of course, this comes from Jer Bear, the amazing Jer Bear.
I'm so confused by people who think that Tessa Thompson is hot.
Really?
Yeah, she has like the most hateable face, and it works for the character. But my God, she is infuriating when I see her on the screen. So I agree, Jerry Bear, in the sense that when I see her, I'm just like and you're right, she is perfectly cast in exactly. We all know that person at the office. Like, she is that person who is advancing the ladder very rapidly. That is, again, just young enough that the young people hate her for being beyond them and being young, and just plucky enough that the older people hate her for not, paying her dues and knowing the ropes and everything. So I think that that's a really good analysis that I hadn't really thought about, that she is probably meant to be hated and did a great job of it. And really, there aren't a lot of people that you really hate on this show. Man in Black, for some reason, I can't really bring myself to hate him, and he's a heinous human being. Dolores, I don't really hate her. I think she's got her reasons. Even Strand was like not the worst person in the world, but something about Charlotte Hale I just detested.
I think Tessa Thompson's hot. I think she's beautiful. I think she's very attractive, but I think she's doing her job, and you nailed it in becoming a person that you just don't want to root for. That's what you want in a villain, is you want someone to just be like, I want to punch her face. I don't know why. So yeah, no, I get it, but I'm on the opposite side of you. I think Tessa Thompson is very attractive. I liked her in Thor Ragnarok. I think the only thing is that I wanted there to be more of Valkyrie in Thor Ragnarok, and there wasn't. Like, I wanted to see more of the Valkyries. Also, I wanted them to do like a remix of War of the Valkyries, but they didn't. No? All right. Thanks so much for writing in. Our next telegraph comes in from Carl Duncanberg. Carl writes in, I'm mostly thrilled with this follow-up season, but my one nagging question surrounds, unsurprisingly, the William plotline. As we already know, this is his entire quest for the maze in season 1 can be categorized as a drawn-out red herring. I'm finding myself a bit bothered that we don't have a whole lot more clarity into what he was doing throughout season 2. He somehow manages to remain one of the most compelling characters for me, and yet, what is his purpose? He says he wants the host to be free to fight back, yet he shoots Dolores when she's on the verge of making a major breakthrough at the Forge. He says he wants to prove that the verdict on him, as shown on the card Ford gave him, was flawed, or that he could change, but how is he planning on achieving that? And finally, in the early part of the season, it shows many interventions by Ford along the Man in Black's travels and tells us explicitly that Ford had made a game for him, and that was called the Door. But what the hell did Ford want to achieve with it? What was it? Is it that we simply have not yet been told what happened after William got off the elevator and before we see him on a stretcher on the beach? Or was this Ford's game yet another season-long red herring? As I don't really want it to be the latter, I'm hoping you guys have some thoughts. And of course, this comes from Carl Duncanberg.
Carl, I agree with you that the Man in Black's quests in this show are perhaps some of the most disappointing and frustrating parts of Westworld. I feel like they build up these big things. These are terms that linger with us, the door, the maze, and what's the Man in Black supposed to do? And I know in season 1, the maze wasn't his objective, and he was even told expressly, like, it's not for you, man, back off. But we saw that the season 1 transition to season 2 with the maze, that we thought, oh, it's just a toy and it's a metaphor. But then we realized, no, there's actually, the maze is a process, and it's a real thing that exists in the minds and consciousness and functionality of hosts. And I think that the door, we saw a manifestation of it as well. But how does it apply to the Man in Black? Now, if I hadn't heard an interview or read an interview with Lisa Joy, I would have said, okay, clearly the door is a reference to whatever the hell is going on with him after the end credits, right? That he was going to this place, and that maybe the scenes that we see with the Man in Black are his memories of that time. So he's existing, let's call that another time frame, right? Where he's in the distant future. So we're seeing, say, present day Westworld, but all the Man in Black scenes are his memories of present day Westworld, and he's actually far in the future, right? And I thought I had it all figured out, but then after that interview, I'm like, fuck, maybe I'm way wrong.
All right, so what I think is happening is that Ford knew that eventually, because the Man in Black is a simple man, and he knew his lines of code, he knew eventually he would meet up with Dolores and then lead him to the door to turn it on. He needed the Man in Black to go through that quest in order to meet up with Dolores and then open the door for the rest of the hosts. That's what I think happened in season 2. Now, what would have been better is if maybe the Man in Black was a host and didn't realize it and was supposed to go through the door, but didn't complete his quest because he's crazy. And, he went off his loop, showing somewhat of a consciousness, but that didn't happen. And so that's where I think a lot of viewers like yourself, Carl, are confused. Like, is this all a red herring? No, I think it has something to do with Dr. Ford to interact with Dolores in order to open the gate, and then also show that he's done this multiple times, and he's trying to correct it somewhere in the distant future when Man in Black is a host. Yeah, I'm with you. I thought just when you think you have the show figured out, you get the rug pulled out of you. And a lot of people think that the Man in Black still is a host because down in the cradle, not down in the cradle, rather down in the forge, you see the Man in Black being talked to, and you see other hosts being talked to as well. What do you think about that?
I don't know about it. It's definitely a possibility, but I don't think that we should pay too much attention to what these saw down in the forge, because what was being replayed in the forge was events in the park. So it wasn't like the actual consciousness of a particular host. It was a history of the park as experienced by humans. But I know what you're saying is the Man in Black. Why is he in a lab room, right? When would that ever be the case? It's an interesting thing to think about, other than the fact that was someone's, I don't know, perception or a simulation. I don't pay too much attention to things I see in Westworld now, because it is just like there's so many loose ends that it's something that you saw as an image that never ends up panning out to anything. Although, it's fair to say that there are seasons coming up and that these could be previews way into the future. I like what you said, though, about the fact that Ford could just be trying to motivate the Man in Black, right? Like, he realized this is a guy that's driven by games. And so if you want him to do something, give him a game and he'll play it.
I think he was on a quest to destroy it anyway. I think he knew where it was. He's the one that set everything up, and he was the one that was going to open the door, and just happened to meet up with Dolores. So, yeah. Thank you so much for writing in. Our next Westworld Telegraph comes in from Wendy. Wendy writes in about Host Heaven, the Chronicles of Narnia, and more. She says, I hope that in the 3rd season, they make a little bit more case for the goodness of humanity. The humans were told over and over to live their fantasies and were made to believe that the hosts would never feel anything. It's a little unfair to judge their actions, in my opinion. Until Kiksuya, I was still rooting for the humans. That episode changed my perspective. I think it's because Akichita was less violent towards the humans. And by the end, I was able to feel the loss of the host who died in the finale. I really hate that they killed off Sizemore. He was one of my favorite characters, really hoping for him to make it to the end. And of course, this comes from Wendy. Now, in her full email, she writes about the Chronicles of Narnia. So go to the website, shatontv.com, and see Wendy's full email. Gene.
So, Wendy, I find it really odd that people keep offering this explanation for the way people behave in Westworld. They're like, well, they were told to do whatever they want. And you could put me in the same environment and be like, do whatever you want. Let me tell you what I'm not going to do. I'm not killing people. I'm not raping anybody. Like, that's not a good time to me. And so I think that's what frustrates me is with this entire thing is if you go to a park and your enjoyment comes from killing people or killing hosts even, or raping, like, to me, that says there's something not right inside of you, right? That's just not okay. That's not normal. They look like people. They act like people. So in a sense, even if you know it's a machine, you're killing a person. And I can even extend it to the metaphor of a video game. There is an uncanny valley where if a video game got too real, I think I would have a hard time playing it. If we were playing The Division and we knew that these characters that we were killing had stories and feelings, and after you shot them, they wailed, and we're laying there, I'd be like, I don't want to play this game. This game sucks. Like, I just want to fucking shoot the guy and move on, you know?
No, I'd still totally play The Division. No, it's I'd like to say that I'd go full white hat, but no, I think I'd probably get lost in the sense of adventure and being able to play in a world without limits. Now, would I avoid the raping? Yeah, of course I would avoid the raping, but I sure as hell would spend every last night in Pariah or at the Mariposa. That's for certain. And I'd probably have 3 or 4 hosts, women hosts all over me, just snuggling.
I think from a sexual perspective, though, again, that's one thing. So if there is a host that's coming onto you, you're processing that as a human, as that is a human coming on to me. Mm-hmm. So it's natural to be aroused by that. But if there's a host, I don't know, just minding their own business, you know, and then you kill that person, then it's a little weird.
Yeah.
I guess a white hat versus a black hat thing would make a little more sense.
All right.
But that's not. But I don't think that's what the hosts are pissed off about. I don't think the hosts or any host is going, well, you know, I was robbing a bank and you killed me. I'm really angry.
Well, Hector seems pretty angry, and that's what Hector does. The thing I'm talking about is like when Logan, he gets so annoyed with the old prospector, and he takes the hand and he shoves the knife through it, puts it, you know, on the table. And the poor old prospector, he wants people to, you know, go on an adventure with him. He's like, it's like a little G-rated adventure, and he's annoyed by it. And he takes the knife and he puts his knife through the prospector's hand, and the old prospector is like crying and yelling and stuff like that. Even though I know it's a host, like that for me, that was more emotional than seeing Maeve's daughter go through the door. You know what I'm saying? Like, I wouldn't do something like that. That's where I draw the line.
Here's an interesting way to look at it. If this park opened up in, say, Scottsdale, right? I'd give it a year before it went bankrupt.
Well, because all they would be doing is hosting day parties out by the pool.
Yeah. Hey, Diplo's coming pretty soon, you know? But I guess what I'm saying is that if they were like, hey, there's this park you can go, and there's like these things that seem just like people, and you can do whatever you want to them, and it's the old West, and there's shootouts and blah blah blah, I'd be like, hard pass on that one. I'd much rather go do something else. I don't think it would survive, honestly. The appeal of this place is specifically for shitty people. Like, you have to understand that I think almost every person who would go to Westworld would kind of be a piece of shit.
Well, think about the people who go and do big game hunting.
Pieces of shit.
Pieces of shit. They go and they kill a giraffe. And yeah, there's, you know, arguments for both sides. And I can see some economic benefit in terms of, well, if there's an incentive for people to protect the rhinos, then there'll always be rhinos. And, you know, that, and the only way to do that is through fuck that. The American bison is on the rebound, and it's not because we're letting people go into Yellowstone and fucking hunt bison. I think people who go over and hunt cheetah and rhinos and giraffes are just sick people, and they're usually very wealthy. They usually have no one telling them not to do something in life anymore because they've reached pinnacles of success in whatever they're in, or they just have fuck you money. So the last thing on their mind is, well, I better go kill something because it makes me feel alive. And I think those same kind of people are the ones that visit Westworld, to your point.
As a caveat, I would like to just point out that having lived in Ohio and having been involved in a deer strike on a vehicle while I was in it, I fully support normal hunting, domestic hunting of non-endangered and non-threatened species is fine. The people who do that, at least in my experience from having been along on those trips, do it with utmost respect. They do it responsibly, and they do it on populations that are already out of control. So
that's right.
I'm not anti-hunting, but when you go out and kill, like, listen, rhinos don't need your help dying. Like, they're doing a good enough job dying on their own. Like, please stop.
The point that I'm making is when people go out and they get a hunting license for hunting gators in Florida, or going and trying to control the snake population, the invasive snake population in the Everglades, great, awesome, go do that. You're helping the environment stay in balance. What I'm talking about is the assholes who go to like these small, parks, and they like let loose the one rhino in an area of like 100 yards. And then they go and they shoot it. Like, they don't even give it a sporting chance. And also, to your point, they're usually fucking endangered. So, and also, don't kill elephants for their ivory. elephants have feelings and complex social structures.
And also, when you catch a rad fish, don't hold it up and make that face. Just be solemn about your fishing, man. Just be cool. Act like you've been there before.
If you're using the fish for food and it's dead, I don't have a problem holding it up. That's cool.
Holding it up is fine. It's when they make that face, like
it's like every Scottsdale guy's profile picture. It's either them holding up a picture of a fish in Arizona, which makes no sense, or next to a tiger.
I'm just saying, Hemingway never held his fish up like that. He just caught it, put it in a basket, drank a bottle of wine.
In Cuba. Our next Westworld Telegraph comes from Gillian. Gillian writes in, can we talk about the whole mirroring reflections that happen throughout the whole episode? Arnold takes away Dolores' free will and programs her to shoot him. She spends an entire season racked with this guilt that she was the one who killed her beloved creator, only to find out that nope, that was never really her choice, so you're free. Sometime in between shooting Arnold and Bernard shooting her, she makes a new Arnold, but since every iteration, that is an exact copy of the real Arnold, he leads her to the same outcome. What's that they say about insanity again? By giving her a gun and making her shoot him, so she tweaks him every time to slightly become Bernard. Bernard then in the current timeline then has to go make a choice to give the host free will. He should let Dolores live, or he can realize that unleashing Dolores is probably not a good idea, so he kills her instead, only to regret that decision he freely made on his own and bring her back. It's like fucking playing ping pong with consciousness and robots, and that's fascinating. That's what I enjoy about the show. Yes, it's overly complicated. Yes, they could have made it straightforward and as simple. Yes, maybe they could have given us a lot of answers to questions we never asked, and sure, they threw at us more questions that may never get answering, but from the 10 and a half hours of TV I watched in the last 10 and a half weeks, I am left again questioning things about my own life, about humanity and human nature, and what this whole thing means. It is nice to have a show that can artfully tell me I am stupid, or thinking that I am a special human, and then forces me to look deeper at everything and see the craziness that is our own species. I just wish everyone would stop looking to be right and guessing what will happen or what the right answer is, and start talking about how the stories they're giving us makes us feel when reflecting on our own lives. Okay, maybe that's all for now. Gillian.
So Gillian has gone from theory queen to let's just think about the overall bigger ideas about the show. I applaud this shift because I agree that this is what the show is all about. It's about thinking about the bigger picture. And I think it's, sometimes as we talk about with Google, as we talk about with Facebook, as we talk about with Westworld, with Delos, sometimes a show has to do one thing to get people talking and watching in order to drive a second thing, which is people thinking on a deeper level. And I think what really appealed to us about season one is it was light on mystery and heavy on philosophy. And I think in season two, they're like, well, if we do more mystery, then we can promote more philosophy. And I think it kind of fell apart there a little bit. But that being said, brilliant observation regarding the mirroring and the reflections. There is a ton of mirroring in this show. And there are cycles in this show. And I think they did one thing that Westworld does really well is I think they actually did this better. We've referred to Battlestar Galactica before. Battlestar Galactica also had cycles. I think Westworld does a much more engaging and understandable job of relaying what those cycles look like and why they happen. So yeah, I agree with you, Gillian. It is like fucking playing ping pong with consciousness and robots. And that is fascinating.
Yeah, I have no idea what she said. I read it. I have no idea what she meant, but I do agree. People need to sit back like ourselves and probably enjoy it a little bit more. But you can also check out Gillian and Jezzy Bell on their Reddit, their subreddit, where they I guess explore literature and books related to Westworld. They have a book club.
Exactly.
Bazinga.
Thank you so much for writing in, Gillian. Our next Westworld Telegraph comes in from Santiago. Santiago writes in, moving into season 3, I believe that Joy and Nolan are flirting with an even more dangerous approach that buys themselves maneuvering space, which is unclear rules. You have pointed out this in many occasions, like what does it take to kill a host? While this gives them a fighting chance against the Reddit AI, which gets smarter every season, this strategy can be fatal given that it's not only further contributes to the damaging emotional connections, should I care that Maeve is dead, but it also potentially destroys the suspension of belief, which for those who that suffer this, it will mean game over. I want to close this on a positive note. I believe that Westworld as a show is in a league of its own. These have been, hands down, 2 of the amazing seasons of content, filmmaking and acting. It is something that I, for one, will not lose from sight. While the road ahead may be bumpy, the show provides, to me at least, a degree of excitement and entertainment that I find unparalleled. Congrats again on the great podcast, Santiago.
I think there's 2 ways to look at rules for a universe or for a show. Sometimes they may look like walls that are containing you, right? Sort of like bars on a cage. So you've got, if we set up this rule, this rule, this rule, and this rule, we've got 4 walls. We have to work within these walls. And that's how we restrict the story. And we can't tell the stories we want to tell because there's too many restrictions. And I understand and I appreciate that viewpoint. But another way to look at it is rules are the foundation upon which you build a story. Shaky rules, shaky story. And for me, the greatest shows that I've seen, the greatest pieces of art that I've seen, always start with a solid foundation. I like to know where I stand, what the rules are, and that all involves world building. And I know that's a term that's thrown around a ton, but it really has meaning. And there's a reason why people always talk about the world building with a great show or a great movie. You need to let me settle into the rules of this world, and then therefore the rest of it makes sense. Now you can make those rules as weird as you want, and that's fine. I think Rick and Morty is a great example of that, right? Rick and Morty is a show, and I hate that I'm even praising this show, but in the early episodes, they set up what this world is going to be, right? They set up that there's multiple dimensions. They set up that reality can be in flux, that there's multiple versions of characters. And so when you see that, you don't balk at it because you know that's the thing. But if in the initial episode, they were like, the one thing that's true in this universe is there's only one you and there's only one me. Well, fuck. Okay. And then you see other ones. You're like, wait a minute. I thought we just established that. And people always go back to one of the things that I love about the Westworld fans is they have really long memories. And they're like, what was the drill up the nose thing all about then? I'm like, yeah, what the fuck was that all about? I was like, oh, he is dead now. Like, that is the end of Peter Abernathy, Gonzo. And then they're like, no. He can still come back. They can bring him out of cold storage. Like, oh, okay, cool. So then he's dead, right? If he dies, they cut his head open. No. You can take that ball, you can put it in anybody else's head, and he's still fine. I'm like, well, shit, man, what the fuck is dying then?
You have to let us know what the rules are. It's like that Always Sunny in Philadelphia. It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia episode where they do the musical, where they're quantum leaping into other people. What are the rules? What are the rules? What are the rules? What are the rules? Yeah, so that was pretty good, right? All right. Check out It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. It's fantastic.
Is that a new show?
It's a new show. It's been on for 12 seasons. Our next Westworld Telegraph comes in from Justin G. Justin G writes in the last episode of season 1, Maeve is about to take literally the last train out of Westworld. We learn in episode 9 of season 2 that she actually broke Ford's programming because of the abhorrent memory of her daughter triggered an unplanned response. This implies Ford has already made plans for a host to break out. Felix handed Maeve a bag on the escalator down to the train. She boards, gets triggered, but leaves the bag behind. If she was programmed to escape, what kind of plans do you think Ford had in mind for her when she disembarked? Wouldn't the paperwork in the handbag be meant for an outside collaborator? Could this just be a weak plot hole? But since season 1 finale, I've wondered, who was supposed to meet up with Maeve? Who does Ford know in the outside world that could be waiting for her on the mainland? Season 2 didn't answer that, so I guess it remains to be seen. And again, this comes from Justin G.
This is a great question, Justin. I've been thinking about it for days now, and there's got to be somebody she wasn't just supposed to take a bag and go out on a train and then just disappear into the wilderness. Like, there's got to be a connection there, right? And I really hope that's the case. I really hope this is not a dead end. I would love to see that there is another party at play, and that's what season 3 is all about. Again, I said in the deep dive that I really don't want this show to go back into the park, at least for a season. I'd really like to see the world outside, and it would be wonderful if there was an opposing force, maybe a resistance, maybe a sympathetic party that we haven't seen yet to just expand and reinvigorate this story. Because I think right now we're in kind of a death spiral of storylines where we're kind of going in circles and becoming more and more, convoluted and losing momentum. I think that it'd be really great to inject something new, kind of like we did in season 2, with a few new characters and a few new viewpoints on reality.
Hey, what if Dr. Ford had a twin? And that's how you get Anthony Hopkins back in the show.
Aha.
But the twin is actually, guess what? He's a host.
Fuck off.
Our next Westworld Telegraph comes in from Adrian. Adrian C. writes in, "Hey guys, I hate to do it, and so do you, but after watching the finale twice, I can't help but find more comparisons to Lost. This was triggered by the scene where we see Dolores and the Man in Black encounter Bernard right outside the Forge. And the entrance to the Forge just reminded me of an entrance into the back of the hatch from Lost. Then I started thinking about it a little bit more. The Forge, the Cradle, the home outside that Arnold built are all similar to locations from Lost. The hatch is the Swan, the Pearl, the Orchid, etc. All secret locations where things go down. It makes me relate the Delos Corporation to the Dharma Initiative, both funding experiments and conducting research. And then I started thinking crazy and relate Locke to Ford Bernard, Ben to Dolores, the end of the finale with Dolores, Hale, and Bernard just being outside in the world reminds me of when the castaways were finally rescued and able to go home. I'm completely expecting for Bernard to have his Jack moment next season and scream out, 'We have to go back,' which will lead everyone back to the park after being outside in the real world for most of season 3. I'm probably stretching, but with J.J. Abrams and Bad Robot involved, I don't think it's just a coincidence. Anyway, keep up the good work, and we'll see you at Shat the Movies until season 3. And this comes from Adrian. P.S. What do we want?
More beer.
When do we want it?
More beer.
Yeah, 86.
Pants. Adrian, look, I think we've talked about this to death, but I thought this was such a beautiful summary of even more parallels between the two that we had to bring it up again. Look, if you're not seeing the connection between Westworld and Lost, you're out of your mind. It's so obvious.
Yeah, I don't know. It's not a big deal to me, honestly. Lost was a great show. This is a great show. Who cares that there's some parallels? I think we're only seeing it because fans of Westworld were fans of Lost. And so we see what we want to see. What is the theory that supposes our reality is biased based upon our life experiences? There's a term for it, and I can't remember what it is.
Confirmation bias?
Maybe it's confirmation bias. I don't think it's that though, but essentially where our life experiences dictate what we make comparisons to. Like if you and I both have a shared experience in that we both watched Lost. Adrian, you and I both watched Lost. So we have, we're seeing it because we both saw it. If you never saw Lost, obviously you're not going to compare this to Lost. So I don't know. It's not a bad thing to be compared to. At least it's not the show like, what was the one like they specifically flash forward. Like it was like a show from the creator of Lost, and it had all these flash forwards and flashbacks, and the whole show I think was
Heroes?
called. No, it wasn't Heroes. It was called like Flash Forward or some crap like that. It's like when they tried to make Quantum Leap, but with a team, they called it Sliders. It just wasn't the same. With Jerry O'Connell.
Sliders was great, though.
You loved Sliders?
I didn't love it, but it had its place. It was, you know what it was? Sliders, I think, came on right after I'd get out of the shower as a kid. So I'd like put on my warm jammies, and then Sliders was on.
Oh, Sliders.
And it's also named after food, and I love food.
Yeah. Thanks, Adrian, for writing in. Our next Westworld Telegraph comes in from Daniel Martinez. Daniel writes in, "So I recently read an article that had a quote from Lisa Joy where she mentioned that the post-credit scene where Man in Black is chatting with Robo Emily isn't where season 3 is going to start from. She stated that it's more of a teaser to a world that the creators of the show are building, and this is the first glimpse that we get, but it won't fully come into play until much later. With that said, my mind immediately went to the way in which Marvel started to set up this Thanos storyline, which we're currently in, starting from the first Avengers movie with that post-credit scene. I sort of like this strategy. From the Instacast, after the season finale, I had also wondered, well, what's going to happen now? And I think providing this context for the post-credit scene is much more satisfying versus it being a teaser to season 3. I can only assume that each upcoming season finale will have a similar post-credit scene that provides another glimpse into the much distant future that the show is ultimately building towards, and with that in mind, I feel more invested than I did before. I just wanted to get your thoughts on it and see if you share in my excitement and curiosity as to how the hell can things get so bad in the real world that the hosts feel the need to bring back the Man in Black in this apocalyptic future. Again, I really appreciate what you guys do, and I'm looking forward to another season of American Gods. That's right, good old Shadow. This one comes from Daniel M.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think that we'll probably see, Daniel, a little glimpse in the future at the end of each season. The question is, though, and I hate to be, Debbie Downer on this thing, but how long will the show be around? I'm worried about a 5-season span. I don't know if it has the momentum to keep going that long. And again, that's not knocking the show. One of my favorite shows, a couple of my favorite shows, but one of my favorite shows was Carnival, and that died out early. Deadwood died out early. There were wonderful, wonderful shows on premium cable that didn't quite make it. Either they were too dark or too confusing or, whatever. They didn't fit the taste of the audience at the time and later gained a following. And I think that Westworld, unfortunately, might fall into that category where I don't know if it has the mainstream appeal. I mean, we have a wonderful following on the podcast and we really, really appreciate it. But you got to understand that part of the reason why the podcast does well is that when you go to work and you want to talk about Westworld, nobody wants to talk about it with you. Your friends aren't watching it. That's a dangerous proposition for a show. Compare that to Game of Thrones, where every Monday you go into the office and everybody's talking about it. Some people who shouldn't be, but still, it's there.
I think this show has at least 5 seasons in it, and that's where the Nolans want to go. They want to go 5 seasons. That's only 3 more seasons. The stingers at the end of the season, it wasn't always a glimpse into the future with the Marvel movies. In some, it would be a little humorous anecdote. And later they got more and more into like what the fuck is going on with Thanos. But yeah, I don't know, if they make it all about this future that we're building towards, I don't know how enjoyable it's going to be. But also, you have to imagine that if it's set in the distant future, sometime between season 3 and season 4, or season 4 and season 5, there's gonna be a huge time jump.
Yeah, there's got to be. I mean, it doesn't seem like it's just 10 or 20 years in the future. It seems like the distant future, although, we could be off. I know that in the show they've mentioned that people don't just die of old age anymore, like that that disease and everything else is fairly, for the most part been eradicated. But the Man in Black does look pretty haggard. But it would either have to be in the next, I mean, he's already pretty old. So, I mean, it'd have to be in the next, decade or so, or the far, far distant future, in which case there's no way that he as a human being has survived that long.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for writing in. Our next Westworld Telegraph comes in from Greg Sanders. Greg writes in, I read and listened to many of the comments from viewers who claim the show already jumped the shark, and I don't agree. There have been a few continuity errors, but considering the story is told through multiple timelines, different perspectives, and some virtual simulations, I think they've done a pretty good job. Many pointed out that the portal at the Battle of the Forge, but they clearly explained how Ford used Bernard to access the Forge and prepare it to save the host and make everything we've seen possible. So my question would be, what would make the show really jump the shark? And this one comes from Greg Sanders.
Ooh, what would make the show jump the shark? I think for me, I agree. If everything is a simulation, that to me is the show jumping the shark. Somebody else had written in and asked about fantasy creatures showing up, right? That basically, if they have the ability to make a Westworld, a Raj, a Shogun world, what if one of them was like a fairy tale world or whatever like that, kind of a mix of Game of Thrones? If I see a fantasy creature on here, I'm going to have a hard time. Dinosaurs, I'd be okay with, oddly. But fantasy creatures, no thank you.
If everyone's a host, and it's not the host you're thinking of. That would jump the shark for me. Dr. Ford having a twin and it's a host, that would jump the shark for me. Military applications, that would jump the shark for me. Yeah, those are just a couple of the top of my head. that would make it. Yeah, if the show becomes all about who's a host and who isn't and all that kind of stuff, then yeah, that would make the Joe show. I mean, I'd still watch it, obviously, because I've invested this much time and we have to finish the podcast. We can't just quit. But yeah, also zombies. They were just zombie. Like if one of the worlds was Zombie World, then I'd probably lose my shit. No,
I think Westworld is Zombie World. Look at Clementine.
Aha! Thanks so much for writing in. Our final Westworld Telegraph before we get into the voicemails comes in from Haley Townsend. Haley writes in, "Hey guys, can Gene please say Las Mudas with that sweet, sweet accent one more time? It's like music. Thank you. Love your podcast and listen to every episode." Haley. So, Gene, would you kindly say Las Mudas?
Let me warm up with an Escalante. Okay, there we go. All right, Haley, here it is just for you. Las Mudas. Thank you.
Thank you, Haley, for writing in.
You're welcome.
If you didn't hear your Westworld Telegraph, fret not. We still have, I think, another Westworld Telegraph that we're doing next week. Right? Are we doing that with the Westies? Or is this the final one? I can never tell.
I wouldn't promise it.
Right.
I don't know.
Right.
We'll see.
We'll see.
I don't know how many we'll get.
We'll see. That being said, you can check out all the Westworld Telegraphs and all the emails that we receive from our audience on our website, shatontv.com. shatontv.com. Now's the time where we play our voicemails. If you want to send in a voicemail, just dial in 914-719-SHAT, 914-719-SHAT. Our first Westworld voicemail comes in from Bella in Chicago.
Hi, everyone. My name's Bella from Chicago, and I'm calling about the Westworld finale. I've been listening to you guys since season 1, and I've always wanted to bring something to the table. So as I'm slowly trying to think about everything that happened in the season 2 finale, I have a couple jumping off points I'd love to hear you guys talk about. So if season 1 was the maze and season 2 was the door, what do we think season 3 is going to be? All right, guys, thank you so much. I'm a big fan and looking forward to hearing the rest of the podcast this week. Take care. Bye.
All right. Thanks, Bella, for writing in, or calling in, rather. Gene, what do you make of this?
So, Bella, you said, season 1 was the maze, season 2 is the door. I think season 3 is the chase. We've talked about if they would be hunting down Dolores, if they know that she's out, and how Delos would go about doing that. I think that's part of it, but it's also the chase to regain that IP. I don't think that Delos is looking to reopen the park straight off. They talk about kind of salvaging what is left, but right now I think that their priority is going to be what of the IP can we still get, right? So we know that the Forge has been submerged. We know that the Cradle has been blown up, but is there data hidden in other sources, perhaps in the host's control units, that could be cobbled together to get some sort of fraction of recovery for Delos? I think that they're desperate for that IP, and so there's a possibility that's the whole hunt, right? It's a bit of cat and mouse now, as opposed to anything big, which would really pave the way for a rather action-packed season. It could be a really exciting sort of Jason Bourne-esque sort of thing, which would be good TV.
Yeah, I agree. It's tough for us to make any. We've seen the maze, we've seen the door. Certainly, it's gonna be something. I don't know what it's gonna be though. Your guess is as good as mine, but that's a really good question, Bella. Thanks for writing in or calling in. Our next voicemail comes from Matt in Florida.
Hey guys, this is Matt from Florida. Just saying I love the podcast. Just listened to the deep dive for Passenger. And I have one question about when Delora Hale goes back to the mainland. If she created her new body, how did the pearl get from Hale's body into Dolores' body? Who moves it? Just something to think about. Thanks, guys.
Okay, so I've fielded a lot of these questions on social media. So basically what he's asking is when Charloris leaves the mainland, she has 5 pearls. Then we see her in the Dolores body, a Bernard is there, and there's the Charlotte host. And we obviously confirmed on the deep dive after the finale, Lisa Joy mentioned that it's some sort of character, some monster maybe living in Charlotte. So we don't know who that is yet. So the question is, we obviously know that there's a 3D printer that makes the hosts in the Arnold house. How did Dolores get from the Charlotte bot into the new Dolores body? That's the question. So what I think happened, and you tell me whether or not you think I'm crazy for this. So Dolores goes to the Arnold house in the Charlotte body. She's Charloris. She molds a Bernard. Tells Bernard, hey, here's what I need you to do, Bernard. I need you to 3D print me a Dolores body. We're going to do this together. And then I need you to take out my MCU unit and put it in this new Dolores body that we're printing together. And then once you do that, then we're going to stick in one of these pearls into the Charlotte bot. That's what I think happened. It seems pretty logical to me, but I want to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, we actually had a listener write in with multiple versions of how this could go down, and it's really actually quite. I was tempted to almost make a flow chart of it because it's just kind of like, holy shit, this is really deep as far as how it could go. But yeah, it seems like there had to be. So there's a reason why there's 3 hosts, right? You couldn't just have 2 of them. That wouldn't make any sense. So you have to have a third one to actually facilitate it. So I think there's the answer is right there in front of us. You've got a Bernard, you've got a Charlotte, you've got a Dolores. It seems like that would be. And remember, in order for a host to perform the function of some mechanical activity, like processing, we saw the drone host doing it, right? They don't have to have a fully blown personality. They don't have to have a fully developed backstory. They just need to perform a fairly, I don't want to call it simple task, but a flavorless task. And so I don't think it's that abnormal. My money would be exactly on Dolores, Bernard, Hale in that sequence. So, I think we will get that answer in season 3. Actually, you know what? We might not get that answer. Actually, it might just be something that they're like, you figure it out.
All right. Our next and final telegraph comes in from great friend of the podcast and scary, quite possibly our scariest listener, Driver Bob.
Hey-ho, gentlemen. It's Driver Bob. Just the last couple thoughts. I'm wondering, why are we trusting a showrunner when they're telling us what's going on? Didn't we learn our lessons watching Lost? And who is picking on Taboo? Taboo is actually a secret season of Westworld. Nuka sound is the forge. Until next time, sayonara.
Yeah, I kind of like Driver Bob's comment here, though, when he says, why are we trusting the showrunners when they explicitly told us before the beginning of the season that they were going to gaslight us and send out, false narratives to throw us off the trail, throw out some red herrings on social media, including possible interviews. So why are we believing that, why do we put our belief into what anything that Lisa Joy or Jonathan Nolan have said?
I think we're so desperate for answers that we're willing to listen to anybody. Also, Driver Bob he must have just gotten laid or something, because Driver Bob he's very cheery this week. Without
a doubt. That's the happiest I've ever heard him. Yeah, I think we are desperate for answers, and we figure, if they come from the source, then it must be right. But they could be gaslighting us, and everything could be thrown off, or they don't know themselves, and we're going to get something completely different in season 3. But anyway. That concludes all of the voicemails and the telegraphs for this week's episode of the Westworld Telegraph here at Shat on TV. Now's the time where we look to our shout-outs. Gene, do we have any shout-outs?
We do, Raj. Shout-outs are our way of saying thank you for listening. If you go to shatontv.com, visit the website, you'll see a little box that calls for your shout-out. You put your name in there, and we will read it on the podcast. This week's shout outs come from Leroy, Zach from Walnut Ridge, Kim from Michigan, Jesse from Seattle again, Driver Bob. Hey, Driver Bob. He is having a great week. Dave and Daniel from Long Beach, and finally, Matt from Florida. Thanks, everyone, for writing in your shout-outs. And again, if you'd like to get your name on the podcast, go to shatontv.com. We still have, I don't know, at least 1 or 2 episodes left in the season, so we'd love to get your name on the pod. Maybe just do 1 episode. It's all shout-outs.
If you love what we're doing over here at Shat on TV, go check out Shat the Movies. You can check out all the information there at shatthemovies.com. And if you did not hear your letter on the podcast, remember all of them are posted online at shatontv.com, where we respond to all your emails, and guests can comment on the thread and interact. That concludes this week's episode of Shat on TV Westworld Telegraph. Be sure to follow us on social media and share with a friend. We're everywhere, including Twitter, Snapchat, and Instagram. Just follow at Shat on TV. Our Facebook page, just search for Shat on TV Podcast. Website, once again, is shatontv.com. Email hosts at shatontv.com. Phone number 914-719-SHAT. Our Libsyn survey link is survey.libsyn.com/ShatOnTV. We're everywhere fine podcasts can be found, including iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and YouTube. Be sure to subscribe, and if you stop by any of those, please be sure to leave a 5-star review. That really does help the podcast grow. On behalf of my co-host Big D, Dick Ebert, Gene, Charloris Lyons, I'm Roger Roper. Be sure to join us. When are the Westies?
So we have 2 special things coming up next week. We'll have the Westies. I think it'll probably drop on Tuesday, I imagine, which will be the Westie Awards. So be sure to go vote, shatontv.com/Westies. And then we'll also have our special Mean Mail edition of the Telegraph.
Oh, yeah.
Later in the week, where we've saved up all the cruelest emails and comments that have been sent to us, and we're going to read them all on one blistering edition of the Telegraph.
Looking forward to that. So be sure to look out for the Westies deep dive on Tuesday, and then another Telegraph mean tweets edition on Friday. There's still time to vote for the Westies. Go to our website, shatontv.com, click the Westies, and vote there. Thank you so much for listening. Take care. Good night. And we'll see you next time at the Mesa Bar.